Mike Radich here, and I'm now joined on the phone by BAMMA USA Bantamweight Terrion Ware. Terrion, how are you?
I'm good. How's it going?
It's going good. Terrion, you got a fight coming up March 28th at BAMMA USA Bad Beat 12. Before we start talking about that fight, let's go back to your last fight at RFA 12. You defeated Zach Chavez by second-round submission. That was a fight that you took on 3 days' notice when your teammate Marcus Kowal went down with an injury. How did that fight all come together? Was it because when he got injured, he went to RFA and said, you know what, I can't fight on this date, but I have a teammate who's been helping me train for this fight. You know, could you offer him the fight? Was it when you found out he couldn't fight, you and your manager went to RFA? Did RFA out of the blue come to you? How did the fight all come together?
Well, I mean, Marcus, he had injured himself in training like a week ahead of time.
Right.
He wasn't sure how bad it was. So he ended up going to the doctor. The doctor gave him the test results a couple days later. Let him know he had a broken orbital. So Marcus called me up and he said, you know, would I be willing to take the fight? I said, absolutely. You know, I'm always training year-round, so it wasn't that big of a deal to me to take it on 3 days' notice. You know, I was in shape. So it wasn't that big of a deal. But, yeah, Marcus approached me, and I did him a favor. I said, yeah, I'll step in. And it was a big opportunity for me as well.
Mm-hmm. What exactly was your main motivation for taking the fight? Was it because you had been basically throughout the training camp mimicking Zach Chavez? You had been helping Marcus get ready for that fight. Was it that you had already kind of put in the work for the fight, even though you weren't going to be the guy stepping in the cage? Was it that? Was it because RFA, you know, they're doing a lot of great things right now. They're trying to be an unofficial minor league to the UFC. They're a pretty big show. Was it that, or was it just, you know, like you said, you train all year to fight, and when you have an opportunity, you just got to jump on it? What was the motivation for taking it?
It was a combination of all three. I know Marcus, he had trained really hard for that fight. He really wanted to fight, and he didn't, you know, when he couldn't fight, he didn't want to let Ed and RFA down, you know, and having to cancel a fight. So it was kind of a favor to him. Also, with me training all year round, I'm always ready to fight. And also just a big opportunity to fight on a big stage. You know, UFC scouts are always there looking. So it was a big opportunity for me as well as a favor to Marcus. You know, so it was pretty much a no-brainer. I mean, when you asked me right away, I said yes right away without even thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. Just curious, were you preparing for another fight? Because in that fight, you seemed to be the guy who had the better cardio between the two, even though your opponent had a full training camp. So were you preparing for another fight, or is it something where being one of those guys who trains all year round and doesn't take an off-season paid off for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always in shape. Now, it's only been 1 year of my entire life that you ever caught me out of shape, and that's when I was injured. But I'm always in shape all year round. I'm always training. My training partners always have fights, so I'm always in the gym training with them. But yeah, I was actually supposed to fight. I was going to fight Eric Winston, who I'm fighting now in BAMMA. I was going to fight him on another show in February, but they ended up pulling that fight from there. So I was training from that, as well as helping Marcus train for Zach. But yeah, I mean, my cardio was good. You know, again, it's the combination of me training year round, and then I was in preparation for a fight that ended up falling out. And now the fight's back on with Eric, and I'm fighting in BAMMA.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Now the fight with Zach Chavez, he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. You ended up submitting him with a rear naked choke, and on top of that, you took the fight on 3 days' notice. So how pleased were you with your performance in the fight?
I'm very pleased. I mean, going into the fight, I mean, a lot of people didn't really know this about me. I didn't really speak publicly about it or to anybody, but kind of had a chip on my shoulder because there were some things out there that were said that, you know, I only want to stand. And then there was a rumor going around that I had asked for a fight against Eric Winston that's only stand up because I didn't want to go to the ground. And it's just a lot was made of it that I'm only a striker and that I'm a one-dimensional fighter. You know, even though I'd submitted, you know, and two of my opponents in my last 3 fights. So I kind of wanted to prove a point. So, you know, he came in immediately. He wanted to shoot in on me and take the fight to the ground. So I was willing to fight on the ground. And, you know, I caught him in a triangle, caught him in a couple of triangles, and then I ended up submitting him with the rear naked choke. So for me, it was just trying to more to prove a point that I am well-rounded, that I do work on my jiu-jitsu, and I'm just not a one-dimensional fighter. So I was very, very pleased to get a submission over, you know, a high-level grappler such as Zach.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm just curious, what exactly was the game plan going into the fight? With only taking the fight on 3 days' notice, did you basically just take the game plan that you and Marcus had been working on and try to tailor it to yourself? You know, what exactly was the game plan?
exactly. I've been one of Marcus's main training partners for that fight, and so his thing that he wanted to do as far as the game plan goes was to move around, stay on the outside, use long range shots. So that's for the most part I wanted to do, but, and I watched some of Zach's fights, and, it seemed like he was willing to stand up a little bit, and then, he'll shoot for a takedown here and there when he wants to. But he just came in right away. I mean, he did not want to stand with me at all, and he shot in for takedowns. He just wanted to go to the ground. So at that point I had to improvise and what my game plan was. And once I caught him in the triangle, and then he threw an armbar that I escaped, I started feeling comfortable on the ground, so I was just like, okay, wherever this fight's going to take place, that's where it's going to take place. If he wants to try to stand with me, we're going to stand. Eventually, I'm going to knock him out. If he's going to keep shooting for takedowns, I'm going to try to defend it. If he takes me down, I'm comfortable being on my back as well. And when I'm going to the ground and scrambling, I caught him in a rear naked choke and put him out.
Mm-hmm. Now, going forward, March 28th, BAMMA, Bad Beat 12. Just curious, how's training going for the fight?
Training's going well. I mean, this is probably the best shape that I've ever been in. Mentally, I'm in a great place as well too. Training camp has just been going excellent. I couldn't ask for any more. I'm having a bunch of different training partners come in, a bunch of different guys come in to help me out, and I'm doing very well. And I feel really good about the fight.
You're training out of Systems Training Center. Is that the only place that you train at, or do you go to other places to get some work in?
That's my main place, but I will also work at go to a striking gym, Team Victory. It's right there in Inglewood. It's very close to Systems Training Center, and I'm working with a crew Rod who works with a number of our guys as well too, and he's been working my striking. So those are my two main gyms. But here and there I'll go to other places and get some different looks and different sparring. But for the most part, I've been having a lot of support from guys that I've met over career fighting, who've come into Systems Training Center on sparring days and helped me out.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you brought a couple guys in to help you get ready for this fight. Anybody that we'd recognize? Any notable names?
Yeah, I mean, you guys like Ruben War, a buddy of mine who's out here from Sweden who trains with us as well too. He was on the Ultimate Fighter. Emil Hartzner, he's a really good striker. Guys from a couple other guys from just Team Victory coming in. So those are probably two main guys. But other than that, it's just mainly the guys from my gym.
Mm-hmm. On March 28th, you're going to be taking on Eric Winston. What are your thoughts about him as an opponent?
He's great, man. I mean, me and Eric are actually, we're good friends. We fought on the BAMMA card a couple of times when he was fighting at 45, and it was always a mutual respect. We always talk to each other. He trains now with some people that I trained with before, who I will continue to train with in the future after this fight. He's a really cool guy, and he's well rounded. I mean, his strength, everyone knows it. It's his ground game, that's his strength. But he's been working on his striking. He's with the guys that are all in MMA now. A lot of the guys have good striking, and I know Eddie Child, who's his striking coach, has done some great things with the fighters that he's worked with. So I mean, it's respect. He's well rounded, and I think it'll be an interesting fight to see who can come out on top.
Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of people out there, including myself, thought that this fight for the first ever Bantamweight championship for BAMMA USA was going to be between you and Chris Beal, because you're on a nice win streak. You're on a 5-fight win streak right now, 4 finishes in that win streak, and Chris Beal, although he lost on The Ultimate Fighter, he lost that fight to Chris Holdsworth, he's still an undefeated fighter. I believe he's 7-0, and he's 5-0 under the BAMMA USA banner. So a lot of people thought that it was going to be you versus him. Were you surprised that you didn't get Chris Beal?
Yeah, no, because again, like you said, he's undefeated under the banner. He's undefeated as far as his official record goes. But no, also because I think Brett put this fight together before he knew what Chris was going to do. I mean, Chris was still trying to, I talk to Chris all the time too. He's a friend of mine as well. And he was trying to get back into the UFC, to fight in the UFC, and he also has a contract with World Series of Fighting. So, I think Brett put together the fight, with me and Eric, before he knew what Chris was going to do. that World Series of Fighting, and they do the thing where they're allowing guys to, because if they're not getting them fights in their card, they allow them to go out and fight for other promotions. So I don't know if Chris even knew that was a possibility at the time, and Brett had already put the fight together. So I could see why most people would think that me and him should fight for the belt, and that'd be a great matchup too. But I think Brett put the fight together before he knew what Chris was going to do.
Oh, I see. Now, against Eric Winston, obviously you took this fight because you feel that this is a fight that you can win. So where do you feel you have the advantage in this fight?
I think stand up. My stand up and my speed, also in power as far as striking goes. I think that's where I have the most distinct advantage. I think he might have a slight advantage in the ground, but I'm definitely comfortable on the ground, and I think my defense is good enough to where I can defend off anything that he might go for, get back to my feet, and just follow my game plan. There's no secret, to what I'm going to want to do. I'm going to want to stand in the center of the cage and bang. That's, all my fights. You watch me. Mm-hmm. I'm hardly ever going to shoot for takedowns. So I'm not worried about, putting it out there on record what I'm going to do. Everyone knows what I'm going to do, right. And I'm still going to get away with it. I'm still going to do it. But I think that's where my advantage would be, is in the center of the cage, in striking with him.
Mm-hmm. If you look at this fight from Eric Winston's point of view, what do you think his camp's telling him to do against you in this fight?
I can always respect that they're gonna try to take it to the ground. I think that would be the smart thing to do, in my opinion. But again, he's working with Eddie Cha. Eddie Cha is a great striking coach. So I'm pretty sure he's working on some things and trying to get Eric comfortable to want to stand on the feet as well too, to set up the shots. It can be any number of things. They can be having him where he's going to strike, and then towards the end of the round shoot for a takedown, or just try to mix it up. If the takedown presents itself, he'll shoot for it. But I'm going in expecting him to pretty much shoot in on me. Most guys say they want to strike with me, or whatever, or guys who are strikers in the past who strike against other people. Within the first 2 minutes, they're shooting for takedowns. So. And I think that's just a testament to the hard work that I put in, the striking background that I have, and there hasn't been too many people willing to stand with me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Definitely. Now, what do you think are the major holes in his game?
Honestly, I think watching some of his fights and watching his last fight, he drops a lot of weight to 135, so I don't think he can keep up the pace that I can keep. So I think his cardio might be an issue, and again, I think his striking is still a work in progress. I think there's some holes in his game as far as his defense and as far as his attacking, his striking. But again, I'm assuming that he's working on his striking and he's going to come out looking sharp. But from what I've seen, it seems like his cardio and his striking have been the holes that I have in his game.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not from the state of California, so I don't know the area at all, basically. So how far away is Commerce, California from where you live?
It's literally like 15 minutes away. It's my backyard. It's where I grew up. It's literally only 15 minutes from my house, probably even a shorter distance from my gym. So it's right in my backyard.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure you're hoping that the entire crowd will be cheering for you, but how many tickets have you sold, and how many people have you personally invited to the fight?
I've invited over 70 people, and I've sold at least about 20 tickets so far with other people. I just got my tickets recently, and I still have other people who are getting tickets. I was only given 50 tickets by BAMMA, but I expect other people to buy some online as well. I've had people hit me up who they're more of acquaintances who've seen me fight. They're not really friends who I hang out with, who told me they've already bought tickets to the fight to come and watch me fight. So. I also expect to be a deep crowd for him as well too. I know the guys from All in MMA are going to be well represented on that card as well, and they're not too far away from the Commerce either. So I expect the crowd to be split. But I just want to go in there and just give everyone a show like I always do. Ultimately it's my job to win. I want to win, but I also want to please the fans as well too. And for the most part, I think my entire career, people have been happy with the way I fight. Like even guys who come and cheer for their guy, even when I win, they come up to me and they tell me good fight. And that's what it's about. It's about entertaining the fans and as well as getting wins.
Now, this fight is going to be for the first ever BAMMA USA Bantamweight Championship. How much does it mean to you to be fighting for the title? And also, does it make the title more special that if you win it, you'll be the first guy to have it?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's super special being always being the first to do whatever, having your name on the list to do whatever, to be first in whatever accolade it is, especially being a champion. And at the same time too, it's exciting and it's special for me to want to win that title because recently we've seen guys like Ernest Chavez, who's the 155 champion, get a call to the UFC. So being a BAMMA champion now, you see having the bigger promotion, they're taking a look at the guys that are fighting on these cards, that are fighting for BAMMA. And eventually it's going to get to the point where it's going to be like a feeder league, kind of like RFA or like Tashi Palace. Mm-hmm. So I think winning that belt definitely puts me in the eye and sets me up for a chance to fight into a bigger promotion. So I'm excited about it, and it would definitely be a special thing for me to win it.
Mm-hmm. Just curious, how many belts do you have already?
I have 3 from amateur, and then I have 1 from pro.
Okay. And just curious, did you try out for the last season, The Ultimate Fighter, season 18, the Ronda Rousey, Miesha Tate season, the Bantamweight season? Did you try out for that?
I did, and what's funny is interesting is during the grappling round, is me and Eric Winston actually grappled against each other.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, just curious, how far did you make it into the tryout, and also, what reason did they give you on why you didn't make it onto the show?
I actually got passed up right after the grappling round, but I think a lot of it had to do with my record. At the time, Sherdog hadn't fixed my record yet, and that's what they were going off of. And I just came off of a loss to Jared Papazian at the BAMMA main event. So my record looked like it was 3-2, but I was actually 5-2 at the time. And again, there were so many guys that tried out. There was 500 guys that showed up. Guys who had records of 14-2, 14-1. So I thought I did an excellent job in my grappling round. And I mean, it's their system. I don't kind of like it. I kind of feel like if you're just going to go based on the grappling round, you can have just basically a bunch of jiu-jitsu guys in the house. I think they should, give a grappling round and a striking round, and then go from there. But I think ultimately it was my record. My record was listed at 3-2, and I sure hadn't fixed my record yet. So I think that was mostly what it was, because they didn't really give me a reason. They just called out the names of the guys who were going to make it onto the hitting the pads round, and that was it.
Mm-hmm. I was going to bring up the fight against Jared Papazian a little bit later, but since we're on the topic now, how much did you learn from that loss?
I learned a lot of things in terms of not just training harder, but training smarter. I took that fight 4 weeks after I had my first title fight, my first pro fight, and so I went right back into the gym, and I started training hard, but I wasn't really training smart. I went in there with the notion that he was going to strike with me and we're going to work strike, and I worked a lot of my striking, and I kind of neglected the ground game and the wrestling. And he came in, and I was just totally unprepared for him pushing me up against the cage and taking me down, and me trying to get back up and coming to my feet, and him taking me down. So just working smarter in terms of what I do, and not worrying so much about what Jared was going to do. Because I think during that training camp before that, even though it was a short training camp or whatever, a lot of it I think was fixated on what he does. So after that fight, now I went to these fights and I'm fixated on what I'm going to do and implementing my game plan. And I don't care what the other guy's going to do and what he's going to try to do, whether he's going to try to take me down, stand up, if he likes to do certain things. I'm more focused on what I'm going to do and what works best for me, as well as adding new skills to my repertoire. And I've won 5 fights in a row. I've finished 4 of the 5 fights, since then. And so that's what I took away mostly from that fight. Learn to work smarter. And again, going into the Papazian fight, it was a learning experience, for me. And I learned a lot from that fight, and that's what I took away from it. So, the loss bothered me for a little bit, but for the most part, it's gotten me to the point where I'm at now. Mm-hmm.
Just curious, how big of a setback was the loss to Jared Papazian? Is it something where, had you won that fight against him, maybe get 1 or 2 more wins and then you're in the UFC or another big show? Give us an idea. How big of a setback was that for you?
I definitely think it set me back, just a little bit. But at the same time, it's like, I was fighting a guy who had, 20-something pro fights, who fought in the UFC, who just came out of the UFC, who no one wanted to fight him. I stepped it up on short notice and went the distance. So while it took away a little bit from me, losing the fight, it also put me in the eye that, people say, wow, this kid's tough. He's, I think it definitely put me on the radar because people paid attention to that fight. Because I feel like before people, I was still, kind of coming up in the ranks and people didn't really know who I was. So main eventing for BAMMA and stepping up and fighting Jared on short notice and, taking him to the distance, it also put my name out there. So, but I do definitely think winning that fight, it could have put me on the fast track, to win, 1 or 2 fights. I could have went to a big show. But at the same time, if I did win that fight, didn't win 1 or 2 more, I probably would have went to the big show a little bit earlier, and I probably would have never learned the lesson that I needed to learn. Because when I get to the UFC, I want to get to the UFC and stay. I don't want to be one of those guys who gets to the UFC and is content with that, fights a couple times, and then gets booted. So for me, it was kind of a setback, but I think I took more positive away from it than negative.
What fight did you learn more in? Was it the Jared Papazian fight or the first loss you suffered in your career against Paul Amaro? You ended up avenging the Paul Amaro fight later. The fight actually before the Papazian fight was against Paul Amaro. You ended up getting a decision win over him and avenging that loss. But what fight did you learn more from? Was it the Papazian fight or the Paul Amaro fight?
Me and the Paul fight, and it's something I've never really spoken publicly about or really said anything. The first loss to Paul, I got terribly sick during the week of that fight, and having to cut weight too just made it worse. It lowered my immune system, and I literally threw up 10 minutes before I went out to fight him and gassed out. And you saw the second fight. I dominated him for 3 rounds, and so I definitely think I learned a lot more in the Papazian loss because it was a fight that. That I felt like I was prepared for. I was in shape. There was no injuries, no sickness or whatever. But I learned for that fight to learn to work smarter and to learn to focus on myself. It's not so much what everyone else is doing.
There's 2 things about Season 18 of The Ultimate Fighter that I wanted to ask you about. The first one is, did you watch the show? And if so, how much of it?
Yeah, I definitely watched it, and like I said, Chris Beal, is a good friend of mine or whatever, so I definitely want to see, watch him and support what he was doing, and just watching. I mean, it's my weight class, so I'm always taking a look at the guys, the up and comers, and because that's why I want to be in the UFC. So I watched that season.
During that season, there were 2 guys on the show that failed to make weight. There was Anthony Gutierrez, who didn't make weight, and then there was Cody Bollinger, who didn't make weight. When you're watching that, how do you take that? Because you're a guy who went through the process of trying out and didn't make it on the show, and then when Dana White's cussing those guys out about not making weight and tearing up somebody's lottery ticket, he's talking about guys like you, guys who are working hard, trying to make it to the UFC and try it out and didn't make it. So how much does that piss you off when you see guys basically tear up your lottery ticket?
I mean, it definitely sucks, to watch that, but and see that because I've had 24 fights, between amateur and pro, and I've always made weight. So it sucks to watch that, and it does tick me off, and it ticks me off too. I mean, I don't think a lot of people knew that. When I fought Jared, Jared came in 8 pounds overweight, and I took the fight at a catch weight. A lot of people didn't know that, and it bugs me, because for me, I didn't come up in wrestling. I've never really cut weight. I had to learn to do this on the fly, and I think it just takes a level of discipline and professionalism, as well as respect to the sport and to your opponent. So, it pisses me off when I see people miss weight. If there's an injury reason or if there's an illness reason, then yeah, I get it. But when you have everything laid out there for you and you still don't make weight, it's just. It shows signs of, a guy not being disciplined and maybe not being for him. So, yeah, watching that, it did piss me off because I feel like, even if not myself, maybe, someone else who's been working hard
right.
Could have that spot in there. But, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I can sit here and cry and say, oh, it's not fair. Life isn't fair. You roll with the punches and you make the best of it and you grind and work hard. And, now I'm in a position where if I potentially win this fight against Eric Winston, I can be getting a call in the UFC and not have to go to the house. And, so.
You've been fighting very consistently since you began your career in 2012. You fight anywhere from 4 to 6 times a year, so you're staying very, very active on the regional circuit. It's pretty rare for a guy to get as many fights as you've had in a very short time. There's a lot of guys who will fight, and then maybe 6, 7 months later they'll have another fight. But you've been very consistent with your fights, and you've fought a lot in a very short time. Just curious, who's your manager?
My manager is Ray Lopez.
Well, he's doing a very good job, I must say. You're fighting consistently, so I'm sure he's keeping you very happy, right?
Absolutely.
Now, on the other side of that, because you are so active, you have a lot of opportunities out there. You're able to fight for BAMMA USA because you fought for them for a while and you have a good relationship with them. RFA, they seem to be an organization that's kind of copied the same philosophy and way they run their show as the UFC. Like guys who fight for them on short notice, they usually win or lose, reward them with another opportunity to fight for them. So you have BAMMA USA, RFA, some of those shows. The other guys who are out there on the regional circuit might be, desperate to get into a big show even faster because they might not have the same opportunities to fight on the regional circuit and take their time and maybe, build up towards getting to UFC. Guys might just, maybe fight 3 or 4 times over the course of 2 or 3 years and jump on a World Series of Fighting or Bellator immediately because they know that they'll get a fight with them, but you're in a very rare situation because you can fight on the regional shows and continue to work towards the UFC and not be desperate to get into a regional show and get a World Series of Fighting or Bellator and get trapped in that contract where you can't get out of it. So as of right now, is the UFC the only big show you have any interest in fighting for, or would you be open to a Bellator or World Series of Fighting if they came in and offered you a contract?
I would definitely be open to it, but ultimately my goal is the UFC. No disrespect to any other reserve sport organizations, World Series of Fighting or Bellator. I watch those guys. I watch those shows all the time. And they have tremendous fighters.
Right.
But there's no secret. Everyone knows that the UFC is the top of the heap. Everyone knows that the UFC, from roster top to bottom, have some of the best fighters in the world. World Series of Fighting, Bellator, they have, their champions and, some of the guys who are ranked, in the top whatever. But ultimately the UFC, top to bottom has the best roster. And that's where I want to be. I feel like I'm athletic enough. I feel like I put in the hard work enough to where I can compete with some of the best guys in the world. And, when I joined the sport, I didn't join the sport to be, second place, third place, or whatever, or just be comfortable being, mentioned in the top 10 or whatever. Like, I want to be the best in the world. And I know it may seem naive to some people, these guys in your weight class, these guys are beasts or whatever. And it's like, I don't set limitations to myself, So, if I never become a champion, if I never begin in the top 10 in the UFC or whatever, at least I know I gave a full effort and I tried, and I put in the sacrifice and put in the work to do that, and I can look myself in the mirror, and know that, that I did it. So, ultimately that's my goal, is to go into the UFC. So that's what I'm going to try to do. That's really my main goal, is to get in the UFC. After fighting RFA and down in USA, and continue to win until they're just forced to have to put me in there. I'm going to get in there eventually.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's just say hypothetically that you win this fight against Eric Winston, and Sean Shelby calls you up and says, "Hey, we got a fight for you, but we want you to fight at featherweight." What do you tell him?
I'd take it. I'd have to take it. I'd go in the weight room and put on some weight and have to take it. I mean, they come calling you. It's an opportunity of a lifetime. You got to do it. I trust my manager. I have my coaches, and I know. I mean, they'd be able to try to work something out where I could fight at 135. And like, hey, and I know for the most part the UFC, they usually don't do that. They're pretty good about keeping a guy in his weight class. You hear Dana all the time. Say it all the time. He doesn't like guys fighting outside of their weight class. Mm-hmm.
Right.
With a guy like Frankie Edgar, even though Frankie Edgar was the champion, Dana always wanted him to drop to 45.
Right.
So I know those guys are not, they're not too, high on guys fighting out of their weight class and, having a mismatch. When you go into the UFC, they want guys where it's going to be a competitive fight. Mm-hmm. So hopefully it doesn't come to that, but, in the instance that it did, then absolutely I take that fight.
Mm-hmm. Terrion, just curious, how did you get your nickname Flash?
It's something that was given to me early on when I started training in my original gym, which was called AMMS out in West LA, where when I started fighting, I didn't really know what my style was going to be, and I couldn't really find who I was or whatever. But Dominic Cruz is one of my favorite fighters, and I watched him fight. So I started emulating his style, moving around and jumping around. And my training partners would just tell me all the time, like, "Man, you're so fast, so fast." And one day, one of the guys in the training says, "You know what? I'm just going to start calling you Flash Gordon." And since then, it just stuck, and so that's how I was given the name Flash.
Oh, I see. Are you a fan of the Flash and Flash Gordon, or is it just unrelated?
No, absolutely. I'm pretty much a comic book nerd. I love watching Marvel. I had all the Marvel comic books, all the DC comic books, and Flash was always one of my favorite, as well as Wolverine. And so, when he gave me that name, I was like, yeah, cool, and I stuck with it.
Mm-hmm. Just curious, do you watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or Arrow or any of those shows?
I haven't had time as much. I catch it every now and then. I record it on my DVR, but my life is so busy. I hardly ever get a chance to even watch TV. Whether it's hang out with my wife and my son, or at the gym, or I teach at 2 different gyms. I'm also a personal trainer, as well as have a full-time job, and I train full-time. So, my day is packed. I'm always on the go. The only time that I have a really good chance to watch anything is when I'm watching fights. So.
Oh, I see. Terrion, last question. On March 28th, how do you defeat Eric Winston and become the first ever Bantamweight champion for BAMMA USA?
Just do what I always do. Push the pace, push forward. For the most part, keep it on my feet, and just break them down. I think I can tire them out if we get into the later rounds. And I think that's going to be my key to success is staying aggressive, and just pushing the pace and breaking them down.
Terrion, real quick before I let you go, do you have any sponsors you'd like to thank, and is there anything you'd like to say to the fans?
Yeah, so we're sponsors, BAMMA First, and then since day one, Fight Me Clothing, Takedown Grapple Ware, Magic Sweat Cream, and an official sponsor, Ace, from Be First Clothing, taking care of me. And just to the fans, hopefully I'll come out and pack the house, and hopefully enjoy the show. I'm definitely going to come out and put on an exciting show like I always do.
Terrion, thank you for taking the time to talk. I really appreciate it. Good luck March 28th at BAMMA USA Bad Beat 12 against Eric Winston.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.